Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. We are going to be talking today about a topic that's close to my heart because I've been doing some work on behalf of people where our guest book would be so helpful. I'm so pleased to have journalist and author Beth Pinsker. She's a MarketWatch columnist, but she is also the author of a new book, My Mother's Money, A Guide to Financial Caregiving. Beth, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, nice to be on.
Yeah, we're so thrilled to have you. And like I said, I feel like this topic is contemporary. It's speaking to me, but I'd love to hear from you. I mean, it's right in the title, I guess. You're writing a book about your experiences caregiving for your mother. Is that right?
Absolutely. The book starts with me getting a phone call from my mom. She was about to have a big major spine surgery. And she said, can you come down here? I lived in Brooklyn and she lived in Florida. She said, can you come down here and help me? I don't know how long I'll be incapacitated with this surgery. I need you to take care of a few things for me. And it started there. And, everybody gets a phone call like that at some point in their life, where time stops and you have to put everything aside to take care of somebody. Somebody has a heart attack, somebody falls, somebody has a car accident. You never know when it's coming or where it's coming from, but it's coming for all of us at some point, unfortunately. And when it happened to me, we had a lot of planning in place. And, I'm a financial expert. I do this every day for a living. But there was so much that I didn't know how to handle. And I had just started my job at MarketWatch when this was all going down. And I remember being at my mom's bedside right after the surgery and having a column due. And I thought, my brain isn't functioning. Like, my brain is all in on caregiving and I'm overloaded. This is all I can think about. And then I thought, well, I'm a retirement columnist. This is what everybody is going through. This is part of what happens as you age. And I'm going to write about this being hard. And the first column I wrote was about this cheat sheet that my mother had given me before her surgery. She had all of her demographic information, all of her medications, all the dosages, all the surgeries she had, like all the medical information you would want to have if you went with somebody to the hospital in emergency. You see those scenes in the movies where somebody's rushing to the hospital and they grab all the medication bottles from the medicine cabinet because they don't know what the person's taking. Like, I didn't have to do that because my mom had this sheet of paper. It listed all her doctors. It listed her Medicare supplement information and all of her insurance information. And I didn't have to think about it. I had this piece of paper. And so I wrote about that, the importance of having that sort of medical information and what my mom had provided for me. And it struck such a chord with people. There was a huge response to that story. And I've been, 2 weeks later, I was still there, still going through it. And I'm like, I hit another obstacle and I'm like, I'm just going to keep writing about this. And everything I wrote about as I went through it just really hit home with people. And I thought, this is a book. People need to know this information in one place. You go to the internet when you have a problem and you search, power of attorney or guardianship. But people don't put two and two together. They don't know how it all fits together. They don't understand why you have to do it. And this book was my way of telling my story so that people could understand the why of it all. Like, you'll read this book and you'll go, oh, that's why we have to do all this stuff. Oh, that's why we need a will. That's why I need a trust or a power of attorney or a healthcare proxy. That's why I need to talk to my mom and have a conversation about where her money is or what Medicare supplement plan she's on. Like all of this makes sense to me now because I see how the pieces fit together. And if I don't know this information, I'm going to be caught short at some point in the future. And it's better to do it now than to do it later. And that's what I'm hoping for, that you like a person who is worried about their parents will read this book and say, I need to get on some of this stuff. I don't know how to talk to my parents about it. And then they'll give the book to their parents and then say, read chapter 5 and let's talk about it. And then they'll have a conversation.
I love that. I think that a lot of people know some good ideas. We're told in separate conversations, hey, make sure you have medical directives. Maybe it's like tell the kids where, like, my dad has a binder with my stepmom and I know where that is, or my mom has given a safe deposit key to me and a sibling. But
But do you
connecting
have
the
the
dots.
legal, you have the safe deposit key. Do you have the legal authority to get in it? A key won't do you anything.
Yes, we do. She has done
Okay.
that paperwork. But that's exactly what you're talking about. First of all, there's a lot of lanes. You're dealing with potentially medical, legal, and financial, just to name a few. And all of them have particular rules that are often there to protect the people that they're caring for, the primary person, the person being cared for. But those rules do not make anything easy. They make it very difficult to be a navigator, and oftentimes, and you're just talking about how your brain was triaging on a very important big obstacle right in that moment. They are not built to be integrated. You're going from one place to another, and everything feels difficult and very challenging to get through, make progress. So and as a Gen X woman whose peers and contemporaries are many of my clients, I know we're all going through it. Oftentimes the female is the caregiver.
Yeah, I find that the kind of dichotomy interesting because women get stuck with the caregiving duties so often. It's just expected of us. We're the ones always on call. If you're a daughter, you're just expected to sort of do this stuff. But women also are not the ones that are the go-to a lot of times for financial stuff. And especially in older, heterosexual couples, the old, couples who got married in the 50s and even the 60s, there's still like traditional gender roles going on there. And if you are a wife taking care of a husband, they might have been the ones taking care of all the bills. I'm helping a family with this now, and the husband always took care of stuff, but he needs help right now, and she doesn't know anything about anything. She doesn't know how the bank accounts are structured. She doesn't know where any of the money is. She's never looked at a tax return. Um, a lot of people are still in that situation, even in same-sex couples. Like there's always one person who takes care of that stuff and one person who doesn't pay any attention to it. But if that person ends up the caregiver, then that person has to take on the financial tasks too, because the bills aren't going to get paid if the person who usually pays them has any sort of cognitive problem or any sort of decline. And that's just not going to happen. And so there has to be some sort of map of some sort to how things work in each household. And somebody has to be able to follow that map.
Yeah, I know often one of the cohorts of people that I'm most concerned about are actually a really financially savvy cohort of people who loved personal finance, managed their own assets, did a really good job of accumulating assets, did a great job of retiring and having enough money to pay for everything, but they did it all on their own. And the 1-800 line for, Schwab or Vanguard is not going to be knocking on your door saying you need a required distribution. And everything is more and more digitally native, and technology in some cases requires you to use an email, which is sometimes something that goes more quickly than other areas of competency or capability. And I've had over the years some couples where whether it was the husband or wife who was kind of the investing person, they came in and said, "Hey, if something happens to me, my wife knows to call you." But oftentimes that's too late because, there's this, you think that you'll be able to put up your hand and be like, "Okay, I'm ready to hand off the keys." Decision making gets delayed as competency or capabilities are diminished. You don't often acknowledge it, and sometimes they're trying to cover up and hide for diminished capacity. And so, a best laid plan of like, hey, I've thought about this on the day that, I can't make full decisions. He or she will call Melissa or whoever. It just leaves me with a pause for concern, that is too late in many cases, and
Yeah.
oftentimes things have been missed that aren't irreparable but are very challenging and can make
Yeah.
things more difficult to navigate.
Yeah. I talk about one of these situations in the book that we faced. When my mom first had her surgery, we thought she was going to be just like back up and on her feet. She wasn't in any sort of decline that we knew about. But when she was in the hospital, she started to have complications. And, what was supposed to be a week in the hospital and a week in rehab turned into, multiple weeks. And I figured out that, bills needed to be paid. She wasn't home and wasn't on these things. And so, by week 3 to week 4, I had to start going through her desk. And I found past due notices for the long-term care insurance, which
Oh my
was our
gosh. Your
lifeblood.
heartbeat.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
goodness.
one thing with that particular account, like she had a trusted contact name. So, my brother had gotten a letter from them saying, your mom, you're the trusted contact for your mom. Um, her premium is past due on her long-term care insurance. You don't want to be past due on your long-term care insurance when you're in
No.
the middle of a care
My
situation
blood
because
pressure is spiking as you're mentioning this. Yes,
yeah, but
absolutely not.
it didn't make any sense to me because my mom was in an active claim. And so she shouldn't have been paying a premium. If when you're in an active claim, you don't pay the premium. You're
Absolutely.
getting money from them. You're not giving them money. So like the whole thing didn't make sense to me. And then I have to start going through the paperwork because she was too sick then to talk to me. Like, at that particular moment, she wasn't accessible to me. And, so I start going through this paperwork and I realize that my mom hadn't been feeling well before the surgery, but hadn't told any of us. And she had lapsed on her claim paperwork. And it had been 90 days since she had filed any of the long-term care insurance paperwork for reimbursement. And so she had fallen out of claim and therefore they wanted a premium again. And it's $6,000. It's not some small amount of money that has to change hands. And so instead of getting $6,000, now we owe them $6,000. And I had to get them on the phone, but of course you can't just get them on the phone. I wasn't registered as her power of attorney with them. So then we got to exchange paperwork before I can even talk to them. And then, so we do that, like now we're 3 days into this, right? And she's got a past due premium. And they tell me I have to FedEx them a check for $6,000 and then sort out her paperwork and recertify the claim. And it's just all this paperwork. I have to get timesheets for the last 90 days from all the caregivers. I have to get all new W-9s and tax paperwork and ID from the caregivers. I have to get the doctor to recertify that she is sick enough to need long-term care insurance. She's in the hospital and she can't talk and she can't move, right? Like, I didn't think that was going to be a problem, but it was. So I had to do all this paperwork in the middle of caring for my mom and also take $6,000 out of my money and mail it to them. Uh, and then, months go by and the claim gets recertified and then they give the $6,000 back, but they don't send it Federal Express at that point. That comes that comes back regular mail. So I'm like, caregivers are constantly out of pocket for sums of money like that. And you float money, and you get it back, and like it goes just in and out of accounts, and it's just, mind-boggling, all the rigmarole that you have to go through. But like, if she hadn't if I hadn't gone to her desk, my brother would have gotten that notice, and we would have, seen the situation, and done something about it. But if she had just stopped paying, she would have lost her insurance.
Yeah, and
And that
that insurance was
horrible.
probably yeah, that insurance was probably sold to her decades ago. And if you think about the logistics of keeping that trusted contact's contact information, for example, up to date, that is a major challenge. And there's a lot of um, moments in time across or down the road where you could have missed that. Let's say what
Yeah.
someone steps in to care for a relative who isn't their parent, or their parent hasn't disclosed as much about their financial condition, because that's certainly, every family has a different culture of sharing and how much they share, and we can talk about the risks of both, right? Sometimes, it's like, oh, here's all these things that are super valuable in the house, and everybody's like, like clamoring for access to the super cool painting or lamp. And other times they have no idea there's a long-term care policy to begin with. Um, and so, you really, as you're describing that moment in time, I know that you're probably dealing with 8, 10 other things that are, legal, getting your name as power of attorney onto accounts, medical, trying to get your mother into better condition, which in a perfect world would be the only thing you had to focus on. Um, Financial, getting the ability to write the checks, reimburse yourself, keeping track of everything, going through the indignities of a process that makes it very, very difficult for you to take action quickly. The
Hmm.
fatigue, exhaustion, anxiety, and stress have to have been mounting as you're tackling these moments in time and telling your
Absolutely.
readers about it.
Yes, and the one, at that point, right? All of that stuff is really hard, and we did all the right stuff. Because we had the power of attorney document. It was a legal, up to date, valid power of attorney document. I had the healthcare proxy. I had the HIPAA authorization. I had all the documents I needed. If I didn't have those documents to start with, when my mom called me and said, I'm having surgery, I need help, we would have had to go to court before we could do any of that. I wouldn't have been able
Right.
to help her at all. And the equation I like to present to people is, you can get that power of attorney pretty easily. You can download one from the internet. They have free options, there are paid options, there are customized options. You can go to a lawyer. Just a power of attorney is going to cost you, $100 or less. $100 to like free, So
Yeah.
if you don't have that document and you need it, it's $18,000 in a year of your life. Um, so,
Yeah.
when people
And
say,
you're
if,
going to court in Florida. You're not going to court in Brooklyn.
yeah,
Like, this is not a process that you can just be like, sorry, I'm, just hanging out here. You need to hire an attorney to appear on your behalf. It's not going to be the first court date that you get the power of attorney. Like,
exactly.
it is a long period of time.
It is a long period of time, and it's hard, and you're going to have to lay out all your own money in the meantime. But,
Yeah.
this is what I'm trying to explain to people by telling the story of what you have to go through in these situations. Because if you realize that it's like, oh, it's on my to-do list, I'll get to it, it's not really that important right now, nothing bad's going to happen. I don't have that much that I need to worry about. Nobody in the family has any money. It doesn't matter. Um, you know, if you read my story, you'll be like, oh, now I get it. Now I get that, like, if I take 5 minutes right now and take care of this, I am protected against things happening that I'm going to have to struggle with down the road. And so it's not about estate planning. It's not about money. The reason I don't use estate planning anywhere in my title or in any of the things is because this is about caregiving. This is about taking care of the people that you love, and about them, somebody someday being able to take care of you. And we're all connected to other people somehow. Like, there are very, very few people in this universe who have nobody at all. Um, and there are lots of people in my world that I love, and who love me. And I don't want them to have to struggle to take care of me, and I don't want to have to struggle to take care of them. And so this is the stuff we do for each other. And it's hard, and there's tasks that you have to complete that you'd rather not do, but like we love people, and so we do them. And it's important stuff, and like it's stuff that people need to think about deeply and get on top of, really. Like it's basic like life adulting for people who are connected to other people.
I use the adulting analogy quite a bit, whether it's I need to do business adulting this quarter, caregiving adulting, relational adulting is what you're describing in the book. If you take us back to the book, so you left us, there was this acute event where your mother had a planned procedure, but then there were complications. And also, as you uncovered layers, got your, boots on the ground, you're realizing, oh, there may have been more need than your mother was able or willing to admit, leading up to these moments in time. So then tell us a little bit about your journey, because I know you've shared with me the book is chronological and it takes you through your story, but then you're along the way, you're sharing lessons learned that are critical for other people to understand. Integrating a complicated and complex narrative, I think is so valuable. So what happened after that? Was your mom able to leave the hospital?
She was able to leave the hospital. She bounced back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And from the time she had her surgery till the time she died was about, a little less than 9 months. And it went fast. Like, some people are in this. I talked to people in my book who were in a dementia care situation for 12 years, 10 years. These are all common timeframes for dementia. And some people had instant deaths, car accidents, heart attacks, strokes. You don't know what you're in for when you start. Our time taking care of my mom was intense, and relatively short. And then so from the time she had surgery to the time I filed her last tax return was like a little over a year. And so I was able to tell that story in a manner that doesn't drag on and on. Like, it would be hard to tell that story
Yeah.
over the course of 10 years. But because it happened for us in this rather condensed time period, I went through all the things that you would go through over 12 years. I just went through them in 14 months. And so these things are you can't avoid them. Like, if your loved one's going to end up in hospice, they're going to end up in hospice at some point. So my mom ended up in hospice. It was just 8 months after she had surgery. For a friend of mine who I interviewed for the book, her mom had dementia care for 12 years and then went on hospice and then outlived hospice, because hospice,
Wow.
you certify for 6 months and then you have to get recertified. Well, her mom outlasted hospice at the end of all of that. And, they were spending down her money, and her money ran out 1 month and 1 day before she died at
Wow.
90. I think she was 93. I'd have to go back and check the book. But you can't like, that's just you go with the punches at that point, but you do the best you can to prepare for that. So her mom had a nice amount of money left. They cared for it, and were careful with it, and it made it almost to the end. And then at the end, they had to make some decisions about what are you going to do, because there are very few fortunes of any kind that can last through 10 plus years of dementia care. Like, that's just a really big expense. It was, it's like $15,000 a month to care for somebody
Right.
in that situation. And a lot of people run out of money at some point along the way.
Mhm.
And,
For
my book
sure.
goes into the choices that you have at that point, how to make the money last as long as possible, how to be careful with it, prudent with it, but then what do you do when you run out of it? And, these are all things that real things that real people face from all spectrums of income that you start with, from all spectrums of like like my generation and our generation might have a certain level of professional career success and a certain level of savings, but it doesn't mean our parents had that same level of savings. And it doesn't mean our children, have that same level of savings. And so, we're all headed for the same decisions no matter what.
Well, what did you learn that you would do differently or that you changed with your own planning and you remind other people to do after you had this intense, call it a year-long experience that, no, you don't wish on anyone, but it's so beautiful that you were able to be there and be a caregiver for your mother.
I am definitely a lot more conscious of the paperwork I generate and the roadmap. I am just a lot more clear about things that only exist in my head. I'm a divorced person. So, um, as a single adult who's not legally connected to another human being who could easily take over for me at the moment, my boyfriend would beg to differ.
Yeah.
But legally, I am a single adult, and that there's a certain responsibility that comes with that to make sure that if something would happen to me, somebody would be able to clean up after me when I'm gone, and somebody's got to turn out the lights when you're done. And um, my children are very close to adulthood, but just barely, and it's not fair, I've realized, to put that on them. But, they're my closest living relatives at the moment. And so, when I had to take my mom off of all of my documents, I had to put them on. And hopefully I'm not going anywhere for a while. And I've left an instruction booklet, obviously, with this book, but it wouldn't be fair for them to have to do any of this stuff at such a young age. So I've left things. I keep things as clean as I can with my finances. Not accounts all over the place, clearly labeled folders. They know where the estate binder is. They know my phone code. I have a beneficiary legacy contact from my phone so they could get into it. Like, there are certain things that I've made sure that they know where they are and how to do.
I think that's
And
so critical.
yeah,
Yeah. I actually I made it my theme for this year when it came to financial advice is simplify wherever you can. Because there are moments in time or situations that require complexity. But if you keep as much as possible simple, that gives you space and time for the complex, I hope. And when it comes to how you manage your accounts, if you have things all over the place, here's the reality is there's only so many things you can keep most people keep track of unless you make it your hobby. And so, that employer that was the longest ago 401k that you worked at, you may or may not have logged in, this year to that account. Keeping things clean, double checking your beneficiary designations, cleaning it up, making sure the ex-husband is off the beneficiary designation. You have backup and successor trustees. If you have a power of attorney and you've named a sibling, and then you say, well, what happens behind there? They're your age. So if you experience dementia, they may also be experiencing aging health impacts. There's just so many considerations, just as you're describing, where simple may be better. I do not judge people who do not use financial professionals, legal professionals, etc. There's a right situation for everyone, but the financial professional, if not everyone does this, but the right person would help you keep track of things and say, oh, what would happen with that account if something happened to you? You have that inherited stock that's at the transfer agent. Do you have a TOD so your kids get that and don't have to explain or go to court or, use a will to fund the trust or things like that? So there's so many different little pieces of financial and legal hygiene that can assist many years in advance of the moment in time that you need it.
absolutely. I totally agree with that. 100%.
Well, tell us how people can follow you, Beth, and where they can find this book. I am so excited to hear about it. I think we're recording this episode before the book comes out. So I've got my order in, but where can people find this book? For some of you, it may be a great gift around the holidays. Let's not call it a Christmas gift because it's may come with chores, but I think it would be great for, kind of fireside conversations when people get together at the holidays, maybe this Thanksgiving.
That is my hope for this. In the vein of keeping things simple, I'm just my name everywhere. So bethpinsker.com, Beth Pinsker on all social media, and I'm easily findable. I've been a journalist for 30 years. I'm way out there in the world. It's the book. It will be at all major booksellers, online and in person, and it'll be it'll be easily found. Put it that way.
I love it. And congratulations on a job well done in such an important topic. This is a work that I know is going to be helping so many people. And I love the idea of, kind of like, hey, mom, can you read this chapter? Hey, brother and sister, why don't we all talk about this when we get together? And here's a little reading primer.
I have seen it work in person. We could not get a friend of mine's father to activate his VA benefits, and he and his wife read the chapter on the VA benefits in my book, and they went down and they organized a trip to the VA and they registered for his VA benefits just in the nick of time because he needed some care afterwards. And he's now getting a stipend and home health care.
Amazing.
So a copay comes from the VA, and some of his medications are zero copay through the VA. And he was convinced to do it finally after, many, many years because they both read the chapter in the book. We're like, here, this explains it to you.
Well, I love that. I know you're not going to hear every story of how your book helped people, but I hope you get some of that great feedback because that's got to make you feel good.
It does. It does.
Well, Beth, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to meet, and congrats on the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way that you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to proplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned. This presentation by Pearl Planning is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of this presentation serves as a receipt of or a substitute for personal investment advice from Pearl Planning or any other investment professional of your choosing. Copies of Pearl Planning's current written disclosure brochure and Form CRS discussing our advisory services and fees are available upon request or on our website platform at pearlplan.com. The information that we share is meant to educate and inspire, not serve as personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with your own financial professional for guidance that fits your life. And just so you know, the opinions shared in this podcast are Melissa's own and those of her guests. They don't necessarily represent any organizations with which Melissa is affiliated. For more important disclosures, please go to our webpage at pearlplan.com.